I gotta admit that next to the first draft, this has to be my favorite part of writing a book, which is my final, or in this case, next to final editing pass, where I've written it, I've done an initial edit, and now I'm just applying everything I've marked down in my proof copy, because it's so nice to just get into a flow state where I can just put something on in the background, get to work, and it's all of the joys of kind of seeing my work in front of me, but with a lot of that pressure taken away, because at this point I've already done the main edits, I've fixed up the story, I have read through, and I have marked down what needs to be changed, what needs to be done, and this is just grunt work essentially. There's some page rewrites and definitely some creative decisions on the fly that are made in this editing pass, but it really is just to kind of chill out, put on some music, put on some movies in the background, and just go to work. There's no writer's block or creative burnout in this process, and that's what I like about it. Anything that keeps my butt in the chair and keeps me going in my world, in my book, is something I enjoy. It's so easy to stop when you're in the initial drafting process. No matter how much you're enjoying it, no matter how excited you are at each new chapter, for myself, I go in these bursts where I'll reach like kind of the end of a chapter in a first draft I'm writing, and then that'll kind of be my pause for the day. I'll have that chapter done, and I need to build up that mental fortitude to get started on that next chapter. I have to like psych myself up into it, and there's all these like stop, starts, and delays. Life distracts you, other stuff is going on, and writing new words is never quite as easy to like sit and just let it flow for an indefinite amount of time. So sometimes even when you're enjoying, even when it's really invigorating and really rewarding, it still is an effort to make yourself go through it, and I wouldn't give it up for the world. But that's why I enjoy the novelty of writing these things down for the first time in a first draft. I enjoy exploring the events of the book for the first time as though I'm a reader reading my favorite book for the first time. That said, once that's all done away with, and once I've gotten things like the cover design and the formatting and everything, I just really enjoy anything that can kind of get my butt in the chair and keep me motivated and keep my eye on the prize. And I love right up there with cover design and refining the graphics. Like I did all the symbols that go into the Xaidra Cycle as well, and that was also a very nice kind of turn your brain off, so to speak, and just get to town on it. Like anyone who draws will understand that you have to have background noise and stuff, and you can kind of multitask, whereas you listen to an audiobook or watch a show in the background, and you can't do that when you're writing your first draft. You can't do that when you're trying to put new words down. I can put on some music that doesn't have lyrics on in the background, and if I'm very specific on my background noise, then I can have something going on. But otherwise, when I'm writing that first draft, it is like this is all I'm about. This is the only thing I'm doing. This is the only thing I'm focused on, because anything else, an audiobook, a show, a podcast, anything else that's going on is just, it's too much. It's too many words in my brain while I'm trying to put words down. I treat it like a marathon. I treat it like an event whenever I'm going through this editing pass. It's generally something I do the day of publication or the day before publication, where it's like my final pass. This time I am giving it another proving pass after the fact, and like after this, and giving it a little bit more time. Like I've said before, Godless, book 1 of the Xaidra Cycle, which you see me editing now, is slated for a May release. So I've been making every effort with this book to try my best to give myself as much time to refine it as much as possible, as opposed to other releases of mine, like in my, with my Ironshield books, there'd be a couple month turnover from finishing the draft to releasing it. And in this case, I finished the first draft of Godless probably about, I want to say like August, like 8 months ago, and the rest has been just editing and refining and trying to make this as polished as possible. And so I'm giving this another aspect. When I was roughly 17 years old, I had worked on a fantasy novel about dragons. I had just read like Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman's The Dark Sword trilogy, and I had of course read The Wheel of Time, and so I came up with a very derivative kind of grim dark fantasy that I did try again when I was in my 20s to write, and just kind of realized it wasn't going to work out. It was just too cliched. But after that initial book that I wrote when I was 15, I came up with another epic fantasy concept when I was 17, and that's what led now. When I was 17, that would have been 2007. That was what led to now in 2025 this book, the first entry in the Xaidra Cycle. I was in a youth shelter at the time, and I just kind of pulled out my spiral notebook and scribbled down the inciting scene, the inciting incident of what I thought was going to be my next writing project, and it turned out I needed a lot more time to get ready for it. So, the years went by, and what I have now, when I realized the scope of world building I needed to put into this to realize the story the way I wanted to, what was initially going to be in the first couple chapters, the first inciting incident, is actually at the end of this 120,000 word book. And you see here, every now and then you'll see I'm working on map stuff and symbol stuff. Every now and then, while I'm going about this, I kind of do a little bit of everything when I'm in this process, like formatting and what have you. And again, all the symbols, all the maps were in and of themselves tasks of their own. While I was still working on the first draft, I was designing the cover, and I was working on the other stuff that I knew I would need leading up to release, which just made it so that I didn't feel that time so much, because I just multitasked everything as much as possible, so that no one thing was just on my shoulders all at once. So yeah, when I was 17, I came up with this concept, and finally last year it just after a lot of false starts, anyone who's writing or trying to get into writing, especially big epic fantasy sort of stuff, knows about the nature of false starts, of starting out trying to outline or trying to write chapters, reaching some point in the story where something just isn't right, and then getting frustrated and maybe putting it aside. And I've had that happen about probably half a dozen times or more with Xaidra before it finally clicked last year, and this draft, the first draft of this book started coming along. So it was a huge, like, I've never been more excited or happy in my life just like writing in a notebook. You know, I can't exaggerate. When it started to click and I got past those first couple chapters worth of content, and I was still going, and I could actually see how this story could go, this book could go forward. And once I actually got past that, whatever was blocking me, I don't like to call it writer's block, it was just being attached to storylines and elements that were not conducive to the finished product, or to the story being as good as it could be. And part of your brain, your subconscious, will realize that, but your conscious brain will have an idea of this is how the story is. And if something's wrong, you won't necessarily know it. You're like, oh, this makes sense, but it's not hitting you. It's not, moving you forward. And what I've learned from writing the Ironshield books and from refining my process is that if you're bored at any point, you shouldn't be writing that scene. Any scene that bores you, you should not be writing. You should be excited and engaged at every stage, especially of that first draft. And if you find yourself pulling teeth and pulling hairs out, feeling like you just don't care about what's happening in a scene, but feeling like it has to be there for some other purpose, you should not be writing. You got to find a way to work around that. You got to find some other way to approach that part of the story, because that isn't it. I'm just going to say this, 8 books under my belt. Do not continue writing a plot line or a storyline that bores you just because you think it has to be in there. If it bores you to write it, you need to change it to something else. You need to attack that problem in a different way, or maybe you have a darling that you have to get rid of, and then maybe there's a part of the story you have to cut out. I've had to do that so many times over the course of writing Godless, and it doesn't mean that the overall vision of what I had in mind is gone. The core pieces are still there. It was like this weight off my shoulders where I'm like, I don't need this scene to go that way. And then next thing I know, I'm not pulling hair trying to make this thing fit and trying to force the issue on a scene that doesn't fit. Now I'm just going with the flow, with whatever makes sense within the story that I've started to build up. And if I'm leaving you with any advice out of this little time-lapse video here, it's that. It's just, you're writing your first draft or you're writing your outline, every single part needs to be something that excites you on some level. If you are bored, your reader is going to be bored. Do not write a single boring scene.